I don't know what it is that makes me feel like this. I don't know who you are, but you must be some kind of superstar. And you got all eyes on you no matter where you are.
Okay, so here's a remix of Superstar I done that is out now on my SoundCloud as a free download. It's actually currently in the top 50 hype edit downloads. It's a UKG remix. In this remix, I'm heavily influenced by all new UKG. However, for this, I'm going to break down what I've done, why I've done it, and what makes things sound like this. So I'm going to start off with the chords. The chords are, in my opinion, the most important part of my tracks. They really set the tone, vibe of exactly what's going on. And if I have a session with a singer, it allows a singer to connect deeply and feel what's going on. However, in this, I'm sculpting the chords around what sounds good with the original a cappella. That being said, there is a few techniques that I use and that are really important when doing this style of garage. It's really, really difficult to try and get right. And the reason for that is it comes from the complexities in rhythms and chord progressions. There's a reason that this specific style sounds different to that of garage through the generations. Why people like Virji, Oppidan, MPH, they stick out so much. It's because of this. Now, in this chord progression, I am actually using a 1-5-2 chord progression. All that 1-5-2 means is that I'm building chords based off the first note in the scale, the fifth note in the scale, and the second note in the scale. And this specific song is in E flat minor, so I know that in E flat minor I've got these notes. From there, I'm building chords off of extensions. What is an extension? Well, you create a basic triad. So in E flat minor, it would be E, F sharp, and B flat as the triad. However, we want to build extensions of these chords. So then you can add what's called 7th, 9th, and 11th. The 7th would be D flat, the 9th would be an F. And what then you can do is play around with these extensions. What do I mean? Well, if I've got an extension that is a 7th, I can actually drop the 7th note. If I have a 7th and E flat is, I can drop that note down the octave and create what's called an inversion. An inversion is when you have an extension of a chord and it drops down the octave to create more of a cluster chord. So here my first chord is an E flat 7, and literally it's just a 7th chord because we're playing the bass note E flat and then building off of that. So we're playing it down the octave, right? Building off of that. So my third note is F sharp. My fifth note is E flat. My 7th note is D flat. My 9th note is F, so it's an E flat minor 9 chord. Very common. From there you can play around. I mean, you can drop the note 1 octave, so if I wanted to, I can make the F here, and then I've got a cluster chord. Again, it's just as rich, it sounds just as good. And then I build in a chord progression off of that. Now, what this style of music tends to use is either 2-5-1s, 6-5-1, or you can go between the 1 and the 5. Now, the relationship between the first chord and the fifth chord is really important. What do I mean by first and fifth chord? Well, the note played off the first chord, the note played off the fifth chord. There's a really nice transition between the 1 and the 5, which I won't go into too much detail because I explain this down to a T in the chord section of my course, where you can learn how to build chord progressions from scratch by yourself in a similar style to this. My next chord I'm using is built off the fifth chord, which is this. Now, I have the extension and I just play that down the octave because this supposedly should be playing there, and that is just an extension. Again, a 7th extension. But what I'm doing instead is dropping it down the octave to create this cluster chord. When things sound close together, grouped together, it can create really, really nice tones. But what's more important to figure out here is the fact that I am using common tone. What a common tone is when the same notes are played in different chords. For instance, these 3 notes are played in both my first and fifth chord, creating chord familiarity. Chord familiarity basically meaning, doesn't sound like a major transition, making it easier for us to listen to. It's really nice. Again, creating that nice tone. And you can just play between the 1 and the 5 and that's fine. However, I've then gone to the 2 chord, again using inversions. I've built the chord based off the second note in the scale, which is an F, and then done an inversion. And then I've got a passing chord here that you can see. Now this is sneaky. Basically for passing chords, what I'll do is move the chord prior to it up or down one note. But in this, I've actually just played around until I found something that sounded right. The drums. So we can see we have a thumping kick here. What I do with my kicks is I actually shorten the tail end of the sample in order to create a more precise and clean kick. When you shorten the tail end, it also cuts off the sub-frequencies, allowing it to punch through the mix and also not clash with the bass as much as it would do if it was there. Then what I'm adding, some hats. Then some hats in between to create the skippy rhythm. Some layered snares and claps. And again, with all of these samples, I'm shortening the tail end of the sample. A very, very common garage trick, but also very much used in tech house as well. Makes it sound much more cleaner and effective. With that, you can also see that I'm playing it slightly off grid. My snares will hit just before the beat, and my hats will actually normally hit just after, creating a swing. I do this manually, but in your chosen DAW, you can actually apply a 16C swing rhythm, and that's very common. Next, I'm using top loops. And layering up some more here. Now with the top loops, you can see that I'm not playing the full thing. This is because I'm chopping and choosing what parts of the top loop I want to play in there. If I play 5 or 6 different top loops and I put them all in there, I shove them all in there, you're going to get things that clash. You can put 1 or 2 in there and it can work really nicely. However, I like different sounds and different elements from different top loops, so I wanted to create a rhythm that combined to make something really cool and choppy and something that sounded bouncy and rhythmic. The important thing to note here is that what separates beginner level production to the higher level production in garage is this use of things that sit in the different pockets. What are pockets? Well, at the ends of the bar. Things like this. Small effects that will sit in there to create this flair, to create your own unique sound, your own design. You can put stabs in there, different effects, different percussion, things that will really make your track stand out. Just in the middle here, to create variation, I've got a reverse hat going in, and then I'm taking out hats. Another thing I'm also doing is taking out some of my hi-hats and adding different things in there. For instance, a bass, a pad, an effect. And the reason I do this is so that that effect or thing that's playing in these pockets can really stand out. If you have everything combined in at once, it won't stand out, it will clash. And what can end up happening is your track can be quite hard to listen to. It's really nice when things don't play and other things play at the same time. That's how you get this really clean and effective sound. So the bass isn't majorly prominent in here, it's doing a nice choppy rhythm. It's more so what I'm using. So I'm using an 808 for one layer, and then for another layer I'm using a mini Moog bass, which isn't necessarily common in garage, but something that I will tend to do on my tracks. The effects that I'm using on it is way more important because I have things happening here to enhance the bass. For instance, I've got this on Infiltrator, which is saturating it. I've got a separate saturation plugin. This is called a soft tube. I've got my kickstart on L2, but then I'm also sending these two basses off to the bus, grouping them together to create a glued effect, so they sit well together. And on the bus, I'm using saturation, I'm using a mid-side EQ, and the reason I'm doing this, you think I'm getting rid of the bass here, I'm not. I'm only getting rid of it in the side frequencies. In the frequency spectrum, you have what's in your mono, which is the center of your mix, and then you have what's in the wide elements of your mix. In the wide elements of your mix, you want things like effects, shakers, pads, anything to create stereo enhancement. But through the mono of your mix, you want your kick, your claps, your bass, and especially in club speakers, you want these elements to really be narrow so that they will come through. Because if you have a too wide of a mix for being played in the club, it can sound completely different in a club environment than it does in your headphones and ears. So really tightening up that mono, those mono elements, is going to be super, super important. For that, I'm using the mid-side EQ. I have it on side only, and I'm getting rid of the bass frequencies. Then I'm using what's called a max bass, and this is just saturating and enhancing the frequencies between 64 and probably 500. And then I have a clipper. The clipper is just making it louder without making it peak above a certain threshold. The reason we do that is to create loudness in our mix. If this wasn't on here, the bass can peak at higher levels and not give the mix as much headroom in the master for me to really push. Another really cool trick I use is I'll use a send to saturate the basses using the decapitator, but you can use lots of different things. Distortion plugin in Logic, or any distortion or saturation plugins that you have. What I'll do is I'll apply a heavy distortion, then a channel EQ to get rid of the lows. The reason why I'm doing that is because I want to saturate the high end of the basses. Well, why? Because on smaller speakers like your car speakers, your phone speaker, or things like this, the bass can sometimes get lost. And saturating the high end means distorting the high end, making them more noticeable in smaller speakers, so your bass doesn't get lost.
What it is that makes me feel like this? I don't know who you are, but you must be some kind of superstar.
Okay, so the vocals. So I've got the acapella here, but it was more that what I needed to do with the acapella wasn't that much, because it was quite a clean version in itself. So I basically just cut off some of the lows, added DS's to get rid of some of those high artifacts that come through when you rip the vocal or separate the acapella. So I have one that's going from the 6K frequency and one that's going from the 8.5K frequency, and that's just taming those high frequencies. I have an RVox. I'm not adding too much compression, because what can happen again with when you separate vocals from the audio is that artifacts may come into fruition, and when you compress, the quieter frequencies in your waveform will become louder when you compress too much. I do also want to tame some of those frequencies, create a more consistent sounding vocal, and for that RVox is really, really good, but you can use just a compressor in your DAW, it doesn't really matter. I then used another EQ to get rid of some of these frequencies that I didn't like and boost some of that top end that I was losing. Just another de-esser basically, and I won't go into it. A great plugin, this one's free, everyone should get this. Really brings that sparkle and that energy to your vocals and mixes. If you can apply this to any sort of instrument that you have, and it really gives it that crispiness, that really cool feel. I then have a clip, again, raising that perceived loudness, and a kickstart that's automating in. So one of the things that I do with all of my tracks is I will sidechain it to the kick, especially when the chorus is, or the drop. And when the drop hits, if you have everything sidechaining, it creates this ducking feel. The kick really stands out. It's really important. I add it to all of my tracks. You can do this using sidechain compression via your compressor, or you can get a Nicky Romero plugin and just stick that on. What's more important is the sends. So the sends that I've got going on, I've got one send for a long reverb, just doing the high ends to create that airiness. Got another send to create stereo width using this, but you can do it using a chorus in your DAW. I've got a shorter reverb, a room reverb, not doing too much. And then I have a stereo delay. What this is doing is delaying the vocal separately in the different ears. So my right channel, my left channel is being delayed differently, creating stereo width. It's actually a really cool technique. Effects. So the effects are different for every producer. What I tend to use is 3 risers. I have one white noise riser, one snare build up, and one tonal riser. This creates this feeling of everything rising up. As for arrangement, I've done a 16 bar build, a 32 bar drop, a 16 bar build 2, and a 32 bar second drop, followed by an 8 bar outro. Now what's more common in this style of garage, especially one that isn't vocal driven, one that's DJ friendly, is you may have a 16 to 32 bar build, normally a 32 bar build, so DJs can bring it in easily, 32 bar drop, another 32 bar build, another 32 bar drop, and then perhaps a 16 bar to 32 bar outro, so they can integrate, so DJs can integrate it in easily throughout another song. But for this, I've actually followed the same arrangement as the actual vocal. Now, I think about structure when it comes to commercial music differently to how I think about it when it comes to playing it in a set. If I'm thinking about what's easy to listen to whilst also playing in the set, I'm combining both ways, I think. Meaning that I want a DJ friendly sounding track, but I also want I'm also doing vocal led style productions, meaning I want transitions to be smooth, quick and effective. I want to get to the chorus within a certain time frame, and I want to reach those TikTok brains that people keep interested. One of the things that I like to do is use what's called active listening. Now, it's a really, really important technique when you're starting to learn production. I don't want to overcomplicate you with mass amounts of ideas. If you're just coming into garage and you're looking to learn to make this Sammy Virji style of production, what I'm going to suggest is learn one technique at a time, apply that technique to each new track that you're making. That's how I got better. It did take me a long while. There's no easy learning with music production in general. It takes time. When you implement one technique, maybe 2 or 3 techniques per track that you've just learned, that's how it embeds itself in your memory. If I overcomplicate it for you, if you learn too much at once, it's going to be frustrating. It's better to oversimplify it. It's better to keep things simple because it then becomes more effective. What active listening does essentially is, what you can do is get a track that you really like, pull it into your DAW and break down how long each section that they're doing is, for instance their build, what elements they're putting in each section of their song, going from what kind of drum hits they're using, what samples they're using, where the vocals are building up, what they're doing with the vocals, the kind of chords that they're using, the pads that they're using, break down every single section that they're using, then copy and apply it in your own way to your own track, and that's one really effective way to learn. I break down exactly how to do this in the arrangement section of my course, which is a highly effective technique to use and I really recommend. One of the things that I'm doing right now, if you're interested in learning how to make UK dance music, you're someone who's dedicated but doesn't really have the time to spend 10 years building skill set. You want to learn it now, you want to learn it quickly. The most effective things that you can do is get a mentor. That's how I learned. I learned from mentors, paid thousands of pounds for mentors. I also went, studied, got into sessions with high level producers, multi-platinum singers and producers, and learning from them really helped. So one of the things I'm offering now is a mentorship. In this mentorship, you get extended version of my course, 12 hours worth of one-on-ones, and added to a community of other producers that are looking to make similar style of music, where you can share your ideas and also learn from each other and get in collaborations. If this is something you're interested in, you can email me with a small paragraph saying why you're interested to learn, what makes you interested in music production, and then also add in a track that you're working on so that I can take a listen to where you're at production wise, and I will get back to you ASAP. If you've enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, leave a comment. It really helps that the YouTube grow, which is growing exponentially right now, and it's something that I love doing.